Hello, sisters. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast, weaving powerful, soulful practices into functional medicine. Step into this beautiful space of devotion and explore everything from nurturing foods, rituals, sexuality, and awakening your innate sensuality. It is time to own your radiance. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Hello, and we are back for another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. And this week we have a new guest, Stefanos Sifandos. He has been immersed in deep men's empowerment work and the exploration of intimate relationships, merging the best of Eastern and Western methodologies and philosophies to promote balance, sacredness, and power in love and life. Using integrative techniques and methods, he has created programs, models, and systems to enhance the quality of your life, your intimate relationships, and in essence, bringing you closer to your potential. So today's conversation was all about sacred partnership. And this is something, as if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, is something that I just absolutely love talking about. So today we talked all about what is sacred partnership. And if you're curious about it, I would definitely take a listen to today's episode. I think it helps to create a beautiful depth and connection with the person that you're in a relationship with. And I think it's so beautiful and just so important to learn some of these techniques. And actually, he does talk a lot about what is it and what makes it different from just a regular partnership. So I loved hearing all of the ways that him and Christine, his current fiance, is how they explore their sacred partnership and some of the things that they do on a somewhat very regular basis. So listen in and on to the show. This week's guest is Stefanos Sifandos. And I have been waiting for this interview for a while now. So, Stefanos, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So, I follow you on Instagram, and so I love what I really want to talk about today is sacred partnership. But I kind of want to start a little bit. I want to go back, and I just want to find out a little bit about how you sort of came to really diving into this topic and really sort of living it. What sort of prompted it for you?
For me, it came from not being in I didn't even know what a sacred union really was. I thought I knew. I'd heard that term before. I was somewhat familiar with it, but very much it was on my periphery. Years ago, I was more in my ego than anything else. And what I mean by that is that I was very stubborn in the way that I saw the world. I was very one-sided and simply structured. And what I mean by that is that I wasn't really open to new ideas of being in the world. And I was more concerned, or rather my nervous system, my unconscious self was just more concerned with familiar patterns of behavior based on what I learned growing up during my developmental years, which of course I didn't really put all that together until I really started diving into it. But essentially I was really coming from a place of deficit and pain and suffering. I was choosing to suffer and not look at my stuff and not look at what changes I could make in my life. And there were parts of me that were so entrenched the greater parts of me was so entrenched in choosing to be in ignorance and choosing to suffer in relationship and behave in a way that was not conducive to a healthy relationship in any capacity. And part of that was being frustrated, not really listening to others, not seeing clearly and deeply the vantage point, perspective, and needs of others, not honoring others, being dishonest in relationship, lying in relationship, being unfaithful in relationships. And that I thought at some very twisted level, at some distorted level, that was the norm. That was that was okay to be that person in relationship. And I left that unchecked. And the guilt and the shame and the compounding of that led to deeper frustration with myself and with the relationship, and externalized projection and blaming and shaming outside of myself instead of taking responsibility for my own behaviors and actions, and not really seeing the nuances and the subtleties in how we were both behaving, and that we were, whenever I was in intimate romantic relationship, that I wasn't able to really see the nuances and the minutiae in the detail,
Mm.
in the subtlety of action. Okay, why is this person behaving this way? Why are they being this way? Why do they believe this? And likewise for myself, I would never break that down and go into the details because I didn't have capacity. I didn't really want to. I wasn't prepared to do the work because that requires a great deal of effort and attention and energy. And I just wasn't prepared to go there and do that. And so I came from a very broken family. And when I mean broken, I mean that my family remained together, but internally they were broken. There was violence and aberrance with my parents against us, myself and my brother. There was great volatility and emotional abuse in our relationships. And so I grew up with that, thinking that's the norm. And so at some level, I replicated a lot of that. Whilst I wasn't physically violent in my relationships, I was emotionally abusive. And I was attracting that as well. At some level, my partners were that as well with me. They were very volatile with me as well. Not always, but often. And so I wasn't making those connections. I wasn't seeing that. And really all of that, I'm giving a very shorter version, but all of that became unraveled when in a relationship about 6 years ago, I was with a woman and she discovered that I was being unfaithful. And for me, that's when the tides really started to turn, when I witnessed such deep pain
Mm.
in her face, in her being, in her body.
Yeah.
I something really shifted deeply within me, and all of the repressed shame and guilt and pain that I had been not only repressing in that relationship from my actions, but since my childhood, it just flooded to the surface, and I was fucking overwhelmed massively, and I knew I had two choices. I had either continue in absolute ignorance, continue my life ignoring all of this that had really risen to my attention at a very visceral level, or make some deep changes and go down the rabbit hole or the rabbit holes and and submerge and not immerse into a new version of me until I had done deeper work. And I chose the latter, and it is always. I mean, that unraveling is still a journey for me. That's a life journey now, in terms of the principle. I'm always going to, and I'm careful when I use this, the word absolute. The word always is an absolute. I will always be attentive to who I am being in the world for myself and for others,
Mm-hmm.
and simply the earth. It's just that consciousness that I'm bringing into the world as an individuated spark, and that work that I chose to do, very deep and very confronting, and very I mean, I can put words and adjectives to it. It was immensely painful and beyond. I mean, and we can go into that if you like. I have no problem with that. But I'll stop there. Of course, I feel I've been talking for a few minutes.
Okay. Okay. So you had this breakthrough when this happened, and this was 6 years ago. And since then, did you have obviously you must have had some mentors. Like, who did you turn to start sort of becoming the person you are today?
Yeah, I sought. I went very deep down the rabbit hole very quickly. So spiritual counselors, spiritual healers, energy workers,
Mm,
shamans, psychologists, counselors.
got it.
I
Okay.
spent, a great deal of time on my own in solitude as well. I felt that was a big part of my journey. I had to acquaint myself with all the darkest, all the quote unquote ugliest, yuckiest, darkest parts of myself, and I realized that required a solo journey as well. And so I did a lot of that. And I would lean on and leverage guidance and support when I really needed to, and there were times when I was stubborn, and because that tenaciousness and can also be stubbornness when I wouldn't do that because I was going through redefining myself as a man, so my own masculinity and my own sense of sovereignty itself, and being in the layers of identity that I was shedding in the world. And so parts of me felt I needed to do that alone, and then I don't regret any of that. And in hindsight, would I change anything? No, not necessarily, but I maybe would have reached out a little bit more. But in saying that, I did really have support, and I felt very blessed. And honestly, and there were some really close friends as well, and my brother. And if I didn't have that support, I don't know if I'd be here today, because I was really losing myself down that rabbit hole. And I say often, it's if you can go to those depths and come back from that, but with a enlightened understanding of self, and a deeper connection and gnosis and wisdom around who you are in the world, then it's worth the journey. It's walking a very thin line and a tightrope from a very high place with no parachute, no harness, because going to those depths, you can lose your mind. Like I literally felt like I was losing my mind. And I was losing layers of myself. And so it's
Mm.
it's a tightrope to walk, but worth it if we can get through it. I feel very blessed that I had amazing people in my life, to really pull me out when I was too deep.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that do you believe that the majority of men out there who are struggling and suffering as well, I don't know if they would necessarily go out and seek spiritual healers and therapists. I know several men now who I have spoken to, and I have tried to talk to them about seeking help of some kind, and it's like they just don't want to admit that they need help. They think that they'll be fine,
Mm.
and I think that's like the toughest thing. So I applaud you for knowing that you needed the help, and you went to find, not just one person but many people that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, the pain. I appreciate that. The pain. Really, what it was the pain was so overwhelming, and I contemplated suicide, and I have at multiple stages of my life when I've been in really dark times. And so I contemplated suicide, but I also knew that suicide wasn't something I wanted to do. I knew I was destined for something more than just that. And so I spent as much time on my own being with that, acquainting myself with that. And maybe at the time, if I have to be really honest, maybe at the time part of that was a form of self-punishment.
Mm.
And that was part of my pattern that I broke around that, around guilting myself and punishing myself. And that was a developmental pattern, a compensatory strategy I developed as a child. And part of that maybe came from there, and part of it also came from I need to be on my own and actually understand what's going on within me, and that was that very strong masculine part in me. So I would spend time on my own with these very deep, dark, new feelings, and I also knew that I can't do this alone. And I've been very blessed that as a byproduct of my volatile family life, I'd really moved out. Not that I moved out. Of course, I moved out of home, but not that I moved out of home when I was a kid or homeless or anything like that. But I really did grow up on the street in terms of I spent as little time at home as possible, and so I became acquainted with myself in a different way there, and had to develop a toughness around that as well. And as a byproduct of that, I did actually create really good friendships in my life, friendships that I still have today, that we've grown and evolved together during the years, and really healthy relationships there that I've had for 20 plus years. And so that's an anomaly in men in contemporary times. I'll tell you that now.
Right.
That's not a common thing. I feel very blessed that I have that, because the majority of men are very isolated, feel very lonely, have shallow relationships, and what relationships they do have, they meet very unhealthy terms and conditions, and habits and hobbies that are not healthy or conducive to them and to the longevity of that relationship or the longevity of their personalities. And I had some of those friendships too, don't get me wrong, but the vast majority, I was very blessed to have very supportive, loving, loyal, connected friendships, intimate, emotionally connected friendships.
Yeah.
And we had a variety of experiences together that forged the strength of that. And so I was able to then leverage that, and that was very beneficial.
Amazing. Amazing. So let's fast forward to today. And you are currently in a really beautiful partnership with your girlfriend's name is, well,
Mm.
fiance, right? Fiance Christine.
Yes, fiance, yes.
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 And I follow her as well. She's great. And I listen to her podcast.
Mm.
So tell me, I would love to know some of the things you now sort of practice in your relationship that you would say is part of being in a sacred partnership. Like, so what are some of the things that, I mean, not intimate things, obviously, but some of the things that you wouldn't mind sharing about some of the things that maybe you do or some of the practices you do together?
Yeah, sure. There are so many. The first is, I think, yeah, the first before any practices come into play is getting really clear on each other's values and our own values. What's really important to us in relationship and out of relationship. So getting to know ourselves and each other at that deeper level, I think, is really, really
Yes.
important.
Hmm.
Yeah, that sets a foundation of who we are and who we want to be in the relationship and where we want to take it. And the willingness part to this is really important. And so for both of us, one of our strongest values within that dynamic is to really be clear that we're both willing to journey with each other and to do that with as very little judgment as possible. To say no judgment is almost an impossibility. I mean, to bypass the brain's primal function in that way is quite challenging. But to continue to come back to, can I meet this with compassion and non-judgment, and am I willing to go down to the depths of this difficulty and challenge with my partner, with this person that I'm in sacred union with, and am I willing just to do the work? Am I willing to look at myself? Am I willing to question who I'm being? Not in a sense that I'm not assertive or that I doubt myself, but if I'm behaving in a way that consistently is showing up in a negative manner, then what is that about? And can I look at that? Can I look at that within myself? Because that's tough to do. The ego doesn't want to do that. The ego doesn't
Right.
want to know about how you're behaving in a difficult way. I mean, that doesn't want to take ownership of that. That's hard, right? And so, do we have a willingness to really look at our stuff and also connect and communicate in a very compassionate and again, as little as possible, judgmental way to each other, and not come from our wounding and come from our own triggering and our own edges, and to be able to really communicate that. So having those principles in place, I think, are really, really important as a starting point. And then the practices can unfold. And so we hear communication being a big thing in relationship, and it is absolutely. Communication is imperative and integral and important. And it's not so much communicating; it's how we communicate. And so again, one of our practices is communicating with simultaneously with the other in mind, whilst honoring our needs. And so I call that selfish selflessness. And so when we come from a place of what do we need, and then how can we express that in a way that's not going to be like projectile vomit on the other person, or blame and shame on the other person, making them wrong, and communicating that to them in a way and in a timely manner, not when they may be in a flurry and they're in between meetings and appointments and they're overwhelmed with a work schedule, or a family member has just passed on and then passed away, and you start speaking about your issues that you're having at the moment with them or within the relationship. So being timely, and then how that's communicated, and basically communicating it in their language that they can be receptive to that. And part of that is not attacking. So we're both very, very mindful of whenever we're communicating a pain point or a difficulty or a challenge, to not attack the other person,
Right.
to really, really not attack the other person. And that can be a hard thing to do because there's subtleties, especially when you carry some level of intelligence. It can be very, and if you've had to survive, I've been a survivor so much. I've identified as a survivor so much of my life. I've learned to become very savvy and manipulative. Essentially, and I survived. I became very tactful in how I would move through the world, and so it's careful not bringing that into the relationship and just coming from deeper transparency and honesty. Another simple practice that we have is that we really allocate morning time and evening time to each other. And so as we awake, and there's a combination of things. It could be having a conversation around how we slept, or having a conversation about our day to day, and maybe it's no conversation, or maybe it's some eye gazing, maybe it's some holding each other, maybe it's just some breath work that we do together. We often do breath work and meditate together, and then I'll go and do additional either breath work and meditation on my own, or stillness and silence practice. But we have that in the morning as well. There's a more intimate, connected practice that takes place.
Mm.
Sometimes it's having sex, sometimes it's lovemaking. It depends, right?
Right.
And then in the evening as well, it's quieting down, but just spending time with each other, not with the outside world. So we try and we really do our best, unless we have something like a project or a launch or a program that's happening and that requires some level of urgency. We shut down our communication with the outside world and just go within, and we go with ourselves. And so that's a regular practice that we have. I think that daily connection is really important. We're also very blessed that we work together, we serve together, we work from home a great deal as well, unless we're obviously traveling and teaching in that way. And so we have multiple touch points during the day where we can have physical connection, where we can stop for a hug and a kiss, where we can communicate with each other in whatever way, even if we've got back-to-back, and we often do back-to-back appointments. But that's something that we're very mindful of, deliberate with. We're deliberate with having multiple touch points during the day, particularly in the evening and the morning. That's a real given for us, and that's been very powerful for us in terms of how we communicate and relate to each other.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And so
Thank you.
how is this different than, when you use the word sacred partnership versus without the sacredness in it? What is the key differences there?
The key difference in it's understanding the reason why you're in relationship, and really it's how you define sacredness in partnership. And so what that really looks like is this, and I'll go ahead and define sacred union by my terms and sacred partnership. And it's also understanding the levels of relationship. So the first thing and I'll define by what it's not. So I'll define it apathetically, and I'll define by what it is as well. And so for me, sacred union is not a selfish endeavor. The primary objective the equal primary objective of sacred union is to ask, how is this relationship benefiting and serving the world? How is it of service to those that we come into contact with? So our union together, it's literally asking that question on a regular basis. And so the catch here is that the only way that can actually really be asked authentically, and the only way that can really be of service to humanity and to Earth, is when we're honoring each other and honoring ourselves in the relationship. And so that's where back to selflessness, that's where the selfish part comes in, but in a healthy way, and the selflessness as well. And so sacred union really is asking, it's not a low level or a level one relationship where we're coming in and saying, what can I get from this? Give me, give me, give me. What can I take from this relationship? How can I experience what I need in this relationship at any cost? It's not that type of relationship. That many relationships fall into that category, because many relationships come from a place of wounding and pain and fear. The individuals in that relationship come from fear. And so moving beyond that. And I spent a lot of time in those types of relationships where it was just about me. What can I get from this relationship? How can I feel good in this relationship? How can I experience hedonism at its peak in this relationship?
Right.
For me. That, and so sacred union moves well beyond that, and it's about the quality of the relationship is based on how the individuals show up to themselves and to each other, and how is the relationship really serving humanity. That's important. And so I look at sacred union as well as there's a one of the principles is the principle of consistent knowing. And so what that looks like is, I'll give you an analogy. We look up to, and where I am right now is really grey clouds, and it's been raining this morning. And I look at those grey clouds, and I know that those grey clouds aren't going to be here forever. Behind those grey clouds is a blue sky. And sacred union knows that there's blue skies always there. And I don't want to get into the science of it. This is as an analogy, right? He says like as a metaphor, and use it as a mythic story, so to speak. But the blue sky's always there. Now those grey clouds are going to come. Sometimes when those grey clouds come, most people prefer blue skies and sunshine, so to speak. I'd say the vast majority of people would prefer that type of environment. But when those grey clouds come, sometimes we get worried. Are those grey clouds going to be here forever? How long is it going to rain for? It's going to be stormy and windy and yucky. We're not going to be able to really go outside and be comfortable, and we're not going to be in what appears to be homeostasis. And people start to panic. It's going to be like this forever. And those in sacred union can just drop back into the core of who they are and know that that grey cloud, those grey clouds, the rain, the thunder, the lightning storms, which could represent an argument or a difficulty or a challenge, they know it's temporal. They know it's not forever. Whereas many people, and I was very much like this, when I would be in an argument or a difficulty or a challenge, I wouldn't be able to see beyond the surface or the layers of that challenge. And I would start to think that this is the beginning of the end, this is the end of the relationship, why we're arguing so much. And I wouldn't even look at the cause. I'd just be so angry and frustrated in trying to defend my position. I would be in ego so much. With sacred union, very quickly shifts out of that. By no means do we not go into our ego. Of course we do. But we quicker shift out of that and know that, okay, there's something else here. It's to teach us. Sacred union is for us. Challenge is for us. It's not happening to us. We're not victimized. Whereas a level 1, level 2 relationship even goes very quickly and remains more in that victimization, into that ego, into that I'm being attacked. How can I defend myself? And so Christine and I have had to learn to really get out of that and shift out of that. And don't get me wrong, like we get into that still, that absolutely. But we shift out of it quicker than we have before. And we realize that this is happening for us. How can we grow together? How can we go deeper into our intimacy, into our love and our care for each other? And I never, ever had that approach in relationship. And so I'm giving you some examples of what sacred union looks like and feels like. I hope that's substantial enough.
Yes, no, that's great. And I just wanted to go back. So you had said, you had just said something like when two people come together and they sort of work together to make the world a better place. Like you and Christine sort of do similar things, and you are now like having retreats together. But what if there's a couple and they do completely separate things? They don't, like, someone's completely not doing, like, they're not doing similar work. They do two different things for a living. So are you saying that solely people who are in sacred partnerships are also working together to change the world together? Because sometimes that's not necessarily possible, or is it?
Yes and no. So no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is their relationship. So forget about what their vocation or their expression in the world is. It's the dynamic of their relationship, their emotional, spiritual, psychological intimacy that they share, and how they show up in the world. For example, they're out at a dinner party. How are they interacting with each other? What's the level of connection, the level of honoring that they have for each other? Are people picking up on that? Are people inspired by their union? He could be an architect,
Oh,
or
I see. Okay.
yeah, he could be a nurse or a firefighter, and she could be an accountant or a lawyer. Completely irrelevant. How are they showing up with each other, and how is their relationship? How is their relationship serving others and inspiring not only themselves and their own growth, but maybe their children, if they have children, maybe their family members, their friends, the community, maybe they are actually serving together. Maybe they're part of a non-for-profit that contributes to the world, but their connection and the quality of the way they are seen together and felt together in the world is adding value to the
Oh,
world
I
because
see. Okay.
they're in a constant state of growth with each other. That's very important. They prioritize growth and expansion and therefore are not stuck in old stuff and stagnancy.
Okay. Okay. I love that. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Now I get what you're saying. Okay. I just didn't want, because it was a little confusing for me, and I just wanted to clarify that if anyone else was a little confused about that. Um, okay. So how about, my other question was, there's from my circle of friends, girlfriends, and in the communities that I'm in, there just seems to be more of a trend of women sort of on the rise and sort of becoming leaders, and also really into wanting to find a partner that is open to having this type of sacred partnership. How would you propose a way that a woman can sort of gently invite a man or woman or whoever the partner into experiencing this and to having a deeper connection in this way?
Yes, great question. So, firstly, uh, definitely check out. It was a few episodes back now, but on Christine's podcast, Over and On with It, we actually did her and I did a whole episode on this. It would have been about an hour or so
Oh,
on,
lovely.
essentially, yeah, how to get your man into personal growth. So, if you wanted to share that link in the
I will. I will.
show notes, yeah, it's really jam packed with a lot of wisdom.
Okay.
Essentially, I mean, obviously I could speak to this for hours, but essentially, is that what, just to clarify, is that what you're asking? You're asking, how does a woman get her partner into, into the work or into personal growth and into that level of alignment and values? Is that what you're asking to some degree?
Well, that, but also if they weren't necessarily um, going to fully dive into going on retreats and reading books
Mm,
and all of that, but was open to sharing it with their partner in a way. How could a woman open that up and sort of invite them in, and even if it was just between the two of them, in a way
yep,
that we're not saying, okay, so this is a list of things that you need to do now. You need to go to these things. You need to listen to
of
these
course.
lectures, listen to these podcasts. But
I wouldn't
let's just
suggest that.
start with us two first. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the first thing I would say, and I would say two initial things to this. The first thing is be that change. Just we learn as human beings, especially men, we really do. Sort of irrespective of what your learning style is. Initially, we learn best by observation. So, and when you're consistent in that, so if I'm consistently observing my partner immerse herself in a particular spiritual practice, and I'm viewing and observing the benefits of that, I'm naturally going to be curious as to how that may affect me and what would happen if I jumped into that.
Yeah.
Just be you for you, because that serves you. That's really what I'm going to say. Don't change yourself to mold to your environment per se. And obviously, take that for what it is contextually,
Right.
but just be you. Really, if you're inspired by yoga, if you're inspired by a Buddhist meditation practice that you go to every Tuesday evening, keep doing that. You don't need to force that on anyone else. Just keep doing that. Keep being you. Keep doing you. And at some point, your partner will either be curious or they won't. And if they don't, and that doesn't serve you, then that lends itself to a conversation that you may have to have. The second thing is what I would say is very important is just have those conversations with your partner. Let them know what you value and ask them what they value. That's something
Okay.
that we don't do enough in relationship. But we with this individuated movement that we're currently in, we're very quick to say, well, I like this and I love that, and this is what I need and I do this. But what about asking what our partners need? And maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know what their values are. So why don't you help each other understand what each other's values are
Right.
and go through that process together? Like really, really, most people just do stuff because they've been told to do that by society or some externalized value system, or because it's habit, or because it's the norm and they've never questioned it. And so have those conversations. Hey, what do you really enjoy doing? If you had $20 million right now, if you had 100, ask questions like, if you had $100 million right now and it was given to you tax free, what would you do with your life? Where would you spend your time, your energy, your attention? You'd be very interested to see and to hear what people actually say. You know, some you might think, oh, yeah, most people just say they'll quit their job and go travel.
Right.
Well, what does that tell you about where they're at in their life and what they think about traveling? Maybe traveling is a big value. So what does traveling give them? Because anything that we're pursuing in life, we're pursuing because it gives us a feeling, it provides us with this inner state of being. And so we have to unpack those layers. And so have those conversations with your partner. Get to know them at a deep level. What really inspires them? What do they really want to be as a child? That question is always asked the children. What do you want to be when you grow up? You know, what were they dreaming of? What would they do a lot as a child? Would they play? And what type of play would they play? And we really get to know your partner at different levels. When Christine and I first got together, we were physically apart. And so we would spend a lot of time on the phone, getting to know each other. We were introduced by mutual friends, and we just really hit it off. But what we did was ask each other really deep questions about life, and funny questions as well. Like, there was a spectrum of, you know, like, for example, if you know, one of the questions could be, if the next president of the United States were to be an animal, who would it be? You know, what animal would you want to be president and why? You know, like these silly
Right.
questions like that, but it tells you a little bit about, you know, who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And deeper questions as well, like, you know, what's your relationship with your father? You know, what's your biggest fear and how have you overcome that? What are your greatest challenges right now? You know, what really inspires you? What's your relationship to money? How much money would you like? Like, you know, because they're direct questions, but they also say a lot about where that person's at. So have those conversations, and all of that, that is all spiritual growth. That is all personal development. That is all value aligning and getting to know each other at that level before you commit, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, the rest of your life, the rest of your life to someone without actually knowing them. Like, really get to know them and what they want to be in the world.
Yeah.
And if that person is struggling consistently to have those conversations with you, and you're a growth orientated person, it's telling you something about the relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. There was, gosh, it was at least a year and a half ago. I had a guest. I don't know if you know him. His name is Andy Drish.
No,
And
I don't.
no, and he was talking about his relationship that was modeled to him by a couple. I can't remember who this couple was, but they used to make this beautiful, there's like these ceramic figurines from Hallmark, and I forget the name of the
Mhm.
couple, but anyway, um, he got to spend some time with them, and he learned so much from them about how they've been so happily married all of these years, and how they spend time together even though they have, I don't know how many children. But one of the things that he said to me that really, it just sounded such a beautiful way, that I don't feel like a lot of couples do this, but he said that quarterly they will plan like a long weekend together to sort of come together and be alone and sort of build a relationship away from everything, work and family and everything. And then once a week, is it once a week or once a month, they'll come, no, it's both, I think. They will come together, not just for a date night, but to actually like have a real discussion about like, how are you feeling about us this week? Was there anything that is making you, that you got mad at me about, or that's making you
Mm.
uncomfortable? And I love that, because if there's any sort of small resentments or little things that a lot of people tend to keep in and they don't talk about it, I think it's a really nice way to get things out in the open before it just leads to bigger arguments or bigger things.
Yes, yes, completely agree. And that's something that both Christine and I practice on a regular basis. And for me, and both Christine and I will sit with it for a period of time. So if there's a tension point or something that we're experiencing that we're uncomfortable with or that we need to discuss, I make a very clear effort to not blurt it out. I'll sit with it. I'll go to my own private counsel if I need to. That's a group of people that I have that's supporting me, if I really need to. Before I just blurt it out to Christine, is something that we forget in partnership is that, and whether you're in a monogamous or non-monogamous relationship, it's actually irrelevant in this case, is that we've evolved in tribe. And so in our tribes, we had councilmen, we had priests, we had doctors, we had, therapists per se, we had guidance, we had mentors, we had brothers, we had sisters, we had mother figures, we had father figures, we had all of that in tribe. And now as a global community, we're more isolated than that. And so we place massive unconscious expectations on our partners to fulfill all these different roles. And that's very heavy on a partner. You're essentially, your partner's not your fucking therapist, and
Right.
they can't be.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't discuss issues with them and pain points with them, but you can't vomit everything onto them and then expect them to open themselves up to you sexually as well when they're dealing with all your unchecked trauma or emotional
Right.
baggage
Good
and
point.
vomit.
Good point.
That's really important. So Christine and I, we make sure that and she's actually, honestly, if I'd be really clear and honest on this, she's better at this than me. I'll sit with it more with myself and generally not deal with it appropriately. And then I'll maybe do a little bit of vomit on her, but not in that way. And then I'll go to counsel, or then I'll go back into myself, and I try and be more autonomous and sovereign. And sometimes it works really well, and sometimes not so well. So I'm still growing and balancing through. Okay, I really need to reach out to someone now, as opposed to delaying that. And then we'll check in with each other. And when we do that, we're way less charged. And so when we cut, we're easier able to come from a place of compassion and love and non-judgment. And that's very helpful. And we do that regularly. And that's a powerful practice for us as well.
I love that. Yeah. Perfect.
Mm.
Well, let's see. That was pretty much like all the major questions that I had. Was there anything that you wanted to add?
I mean, there's so much I could add. Depends on which where we want to go, or what we're going to speak to. But yeah, I mean, it's relationships require effort, and that's
Yes.
something I really learned. And that isn't a novelty. That is real stuff. Relationships require immense effort, not all the time. It doesn't have to be this arduous thing in your life that
Right.
is sapping your energy. But when it's go time, it's go time. Like it's going to require effort. It's going to require you to dig deep, to push past some of your own wounding and your pains and your yuckiness and the uglier, quote unquote, the ugly parts of self, and to really go in there with your partner and get into the trenches and know that you can recover from that, and that you can flourish even deeper in intimacy and love and connection, and in the relationship, and in how you serve each other in the world. And it requires effort and willingness. Like that is something that's very, very important and undervalued in relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also, I mean, I just see a lot of couples, just even simply not knowing how to communicate, or communicating their deepest fears, or their feelings. And so everything's sort
Mm,
of bottled up, and then nothing gets resolved.
mm,
I see that often.
mm. Yeah, as do I.
Yeah.
As do I.
So how
Yeah,
can
and then
people,
resentment builds.
yes, it does build. It does build. So how can people find you? And tell us how you coach men? Tell me how you work.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking. Yes, I coach men, and I coach women as well on a one-on-one level, on a one-on-one basis. And I also work with men in groups, and will be beginning to work with women in groups as well, and really bringing out feminine masculine balance, and helping women really understand the masculine at a deeper level, and in turn, of course, knowing themselves and knowing their own inner feminine at a deeper level, through really connecting to healthy masculine principles, and learning how to bring in men in their lives that align with that, but also if they're in relationship, bringing out the best in their man in a way that is not emasculating or in a way that really supports men in their lives as well. So, I work with both men and women in different ways. You can reach me on any of my social media channels, Stefanos Sifandos. My website is stefanossifandos.com. So yeah, that's very, very easy to reach me. Just the name is a little bit long, but put that in your show notes. I'm sure people will be able to find that.
And then Instagram?
Yes,
You're
Stefanos Sifandos.
same thing? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for this. I was really looking forward to talking to you about this and just kind of putting together some questions that to just bring out some questions that maybe some couples can start asking and proposing in their current relationships, and hoping to maybe have them become closer and have deeper connections.
Yes. Amazing.
Stefanos, thank you so much for your time, and we will talk soon. Thank you. All right. If you love this conversation and you want to learn more about Stefanos and his offerings, head on over to margaretromero.com/episode 117. And I will speak to you all next week. Thank you so much for listening. Wherever you are in this world, I appreciate and love you. Goodbye for now.